What's up, New Hope family? Welcome to episode 16 of the show with no name. My name is David. I'm very glad that you are here with us today. With me, as always, Pastor Leo.
Kamusta, everyone?
Hello, Leo. Kamusta to you as well.
There we go.
Still don't know if I say it
Mabuti
correctly.
naman.
Yep. 7.
Yes.
I don't know. We are back for more of Judges.
Mm-hmm.
If you missed last week,
Ooh, that
just
was
shut this
fun
episode
one,
off now and go listen to episode 15. We finally talked about Ehud on a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And like middle school David loved it. Judges is like the perfect book for like middle school boys who want to go see like 300 in the theater, but they probably shouldn't go see that yet. Just have them read Judges.
Yes.
Judges is like the historical, the like violent historical epic movie of the Old Testament.
Yeah.
It's great. But as we're learning, we're a couple episodes in now, there's actually a lot for us to learn from it beyond just, the history and
Beyond
stuff.
just the Ehudness.
Beyond the Ehudness. And today we're going to get to one of our biggest judges.
Yes.
Do you have a favorite judge? And you can't say Judge Judy. You made the Judge Judy joke last week. You can't do it this week.
My favorite judge when I was a kid
Ehud
was
is obviously
like Samson.
Samson, yeah.
But it's not because of what he did
Okay.
toward the end of his life. It's that jaw thing.
The jawbone.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
that's
the
a good
jawbone. It's like I keep imagining what must that have looked like.
Violent.
I mean, we
we
talked about our boy Shamgar.
Yeah.
Right.
600.
He had an ox goad.
Yep.
Samson had a jawbone.
Yep. We read about later on we read about David's mighty men, and we get to hear some of the like fantastic tales of what they who did similar things where
right.
like they killed 600 Philistines in a day with one weapon or something like that. But yeah, we get to see like speckles of it throughout Judges. And you're always just like, man, like what magical powers did these guys have to be able to do these things? Then you're like, oh God, they had God. That's what they had.
They had God.
They had God. That's a little different.
They didn't have Gandalf the Grey.
They didn't. But it is interesting because we talked last week about how different cultures would kind of appropriate the gods and the mythologies of other cultures and pull them in, and there are a lot of parallels that you'll see between some of the characters we read about in the Old Testament and the Greek heroes, right. And Sumerian heroes, and just go on and on and on. And it is interesting that all these different cultures have these similar stories. I mean, even you talk about the flood, right? Like almost every ancient people had a story of a flood that destroyed
which some
everything.
People say didn't happen.
Right. Right. But like it's so interesting to see all those things translate. I wrote a paper in college comparing a lot of the Old Testament stories to Greek mythology for one of my classes, and so like Samson and
should do
Heracles.
A deep dive on that paper.
That paper probably no longer exists. I mean, it might somewhere. I think somewhere we still have my laptop that's like bricked. So like maybe if we like get the hard drive off of it, maybe. I think the really sad thing is I wrote for my Galatians class, I had to write the whole class. All you do is you write a commentary on the book of Galatians all semester.
Right.
That's your grade. And I don't know if I have that anymore. And that it was like 55-page commentary on the book of Galatians. Not that it is needed to exist, but I spent a lot of time on that commentary, and I'm sad that that's probably gone. But yeah, it is interesting as you read through Judges and you hear those crazy things that happened. And that's like there are people so Christian literalists would be people that take all of this as like all of this literally happened.
Yes.
Most evangelical Christians would probably fall into that category. But I know some people that I absolutely know love Jesus, and they're not convinced that everything we read about in the Old Testament factually happened. And when we went through Romans, right, and we talked about the essentials and the non-essentials, where would you put that? Like, if I don't believe that story in Ehud for sure happened, and I think it might just be, okay, we're supposed to learn a lesson, like a parable of Jesus almost. Am I not saved if I'm wrong?
Well, let me ask you a question. What is the greatest miracle in the Bible?
I don't know if I'm allowed to rank the miracles. Am I going to get smited through the roof here? I would assume Jesus defeating death is probably number one if I had to pick one.
Yeah. My take on this is the greatest miracle in the Bible is Genesis 1 verse 1.
Okay.
So
start at the beginning.
If God was able to do something like that, then everything else in the Bible is at least probable.
I think that's very fair to say.
Right?
Yeah.
So if God was able to make the heavens and the earth, then everything that happened in the Bible, including like Ehud and Shamgar killing 600 Philistines, it's at least probable.
I think that's very fair and very reasonable.
So yeah, that's my take on it. So you can be literal, you can doubt it if you want, but think about it. If it's probable, it's only a testament to how wonderful God is.
Well said, Leo. We have 2 chapters today. We gave you a lot of reading.
Yeah.
So pause
including a song.
Pause it. Yeah, that's true. And I want to, if anyone's saying it, please let us know in the comments. Actually, as I was reading it, because I was dumb, apparently, as I was reading it. I was like, this is a terrible song. And then I'm like, well, obviously they didn't write it in English. Right. And it didn't sound like I'm reading it right now. But I don't want to talk about that.
They should have just used the lyrics of I Will Survive.
Would you like to give us a little... You can't go more than 20 seconds or we can't post this podcast.
Right.
Go ahead and sing a little bit of it for us, Leo.
Like, at first I was afraid.
I was hoping you were going falsetto.
I was terrified.
It would work. Yeah.
Yeah, right?
It would work for most of the judges. I feel like most of them are like, oh,
have you seen that movie, The Replacements? With
the football movie? Yeah. Yep.
It's like that prison scene where they use that. It's like, at first I was afraid. I was petrified. Like that's Debbie and Barky.
Barky? Oh no. All right, let's get into Judges 4 and 5 before Leo gives out more nicknames. Right. Why don't you give us our summary here, Leo?
Okay, so it's very simple for this one. God is able to use the selfish decisions of humans in order to bring about his glory and save his people. That's it.
So we get our third.
Well, actually the fourth, because we forgot. I forgot ShamWow.
Sure, but although when we read about, I'm not going to call him ShamWow. When we read about Shamgar, we don't read about the Israelites falling away in that part.
That's
so we don't necessarily read about that cycle. Like, for all we know, and I don't have a commentary.
You know what? That's true. That makes sense.
For all we know, he could have existed during that 80 years of peace.
Right.
Because again, we talked about this last week. It says 80 years of peace. That doesn't mean like there wasn't a single like raid from the Philistines during that time.
That is true.
There wasn't a single, bad summer where they didn't get enough rain and their crops didn't grow.
So technically, yes, third.
So it's the third time we specifically read the cycle.
Yes.
They fall away. Because we don't really know.
Yeah.
If Shamgar just showed up to, kill some Philistines, or if he specifically had to rise up because the cycle had hit again. So third or fourth. We'll say third or fourth.
Third or fourth.
Third or fourth time through the cycle.
Fourth.
And it just keeps repeating itself over and over. It's just crazy.
That's so true.
Again, it's the same thing like when we, you read about the Israelites in the wilderness and you continue to see them complain, and then God comes through and they worship him, and then they get annoyed again and they start complaining. You're like, oh my word, do you not see what God's doing for you? And yet when we look and we reflect at our own lives, we see ourselves doing the same thing. But
that's true. Man,
we just see this process going on over and over again.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. Let's stop looking at the nation of Israel. Let's stop. It's easy for us to say, what are you doing, you guys? Can you not see that God is working for you? It's easy to say that to them in hindsight, now that we're looking at it outside the box. But how about ourselves? Think about it. Did we do that last week? Did you do it last week? Did you keep repeating the same sins that you already knew were wrong? Did we do the same thing individually, as a family, as a couple, if you're married, as a nation? Did we do something like that repeatedly, right? Did we always do good things that we knew were right? I mean, self-examination is harder than blaming God and pointing fingers.
For sure.
It's easy to do that, but once you look at yourself, you're going to realize, uh-oh.
And that's the mindset we have to have while we're reading this. We don't read this so we can like laugh at the ancient Israelites and be like, what a bunch of idiots. Like we read this because we need to like have some self-reflection and see ourselves in that. And okay, where do I fall? Am I Deborah? Or am I the person Deborah had to come save because I kept turning away from God?
Exactly.
And it might not look like me doing, worshiping another God, right? Like I didn't change my religion to something else. I didn't become Buddhist.
Yes.
And the oppression in my life, probably isn't the king of Canaan oppressing my people for 20 years. But those things in my life, am I putting other things in front of God? Like you said, am I not doing right things that I know I should be doing? Am I doing wrong things I know I shouldn't be doing?
Right.
And especially the cycle, the things that just continue to stick in our lives. So Judges 4:3, we have the king of Canaan. Now, again, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. Canaan wasn't just a country. And so we don't necessarily know just from this text, but it says he reigned in Hazor. And so, you can use geography and try to figure out what nation he might have been the king of. But so one of the kings of Canaan, oppresses them. His name is Jabin. I like Jabin.
Yabin.
He was. Oh, it's a soft J, like yogging. But yeah, he's pretty powerful. It seems like we read when we first got to Judges. We read about, there's iron chariots, so we can't fight those people. Even though God told him to. Well, this guy has 900 of them.
Yeah.
And again, we talked. This is why it's important to stick with us every week. We talked last week. Israel isn't like a powerful nation with a professional army. These are shepherds,
collection of
and
tribes.
farmers,
yes,
in their tribes that, when they need to, they might show up and fight. But we talked about last week. Shamgar fought with the weapon he used to move his oxen. Like this isn't the nation of Israel under David, winning these wars with this big, powerful army and mercenaries from, the Hittites and all these. Like, no, this is just these little tribes. And this dude's got 900 iron chariots. And if you have 900 iron chariots, you probably have
more.
You also probably have more, but you also most likely have 10 to 20,000 foot soldiers, and then probably a couple thousand skirmishers, which would be people that throw spears or archers.
Right.
Like this dude's got a lot. Like it's not like he just had 900 chariots and that was it. Like, well, what we just read that they killed 10,000 Moabites. They couldn't stop 900 chariots. No, he had 900 chariots, which means his army was huge. Dude's army was huge. So it's not going well for the Israelites right now. Is that fair to say?
That's right.
Pretty big army?
It is. That was a very big and powerful army.
Yeah.
Israel's army was also, at this time, far less equipped.
For sure.
They had no chariots. Probably have very few horses. Probably not much armor. I mean, if Shamgar had to fight with an ox goad.
Right.
I mean, yeah, right? So it probably not a lot of weapons, judging from Ehud making his own, right?
Sure.
So at that time, iron chariots were almost like tanks going against a bunch of, not just infantry, like mercenaries.
I mean, just farmers.
Or farmers,
I mean, like
farmers with pitchforks.
Go wear shorts and a tank top. And hold a stick that's pointy on the end, and then have iron chariots coming at you. And like ancient chariots, it wasn't just, the guy in the back who could shoot with the bow. They would have like spikes or blades that would come off of the wheels, and they would drive them right through a crowd. And I mean, it would just
think about it, 900 chariots probably pulled by, let's say, 1 or 2 horses, but the sound of
Oh, my
900,
word. Yeah, that must have been
1,800 horses
Yep.
on the ground,
With a metal chariot
coming
behind
towards
them.
you, that just would drive
Yeah.
you insane.
And then Deborah shows up.
Yay,
And she's
Debbie!
like, "What's up? I'm Deborah." So tell us a little bit about Deborah.
All
we
right.
haven't had a female judge yet up to this point, and so
That's right.
that's also interesting.
Debbie was one of the judges.
I hope she hated that nickname, and she's
So
she's
true.
in heaven right now. She's just like that, Leo. When he gets up here, I'm gonna let him have it about Debbie.
Who are you calling Debbie? So, she's called a prophetess and the wife of Lapidoth. The Lord spoke through her as she held court under a tree that they call now the Palm of Deborah. So that happened in Ephraim. But that Palm of Debbie too has a story on its own. It has a lot of significance. Think about it. That palm tree could have been named the Palm of Debbie before or after the fact.
Deborah.
Right? Deborah. The Palm of Deborah before or after the fact. If it was before the fact, before everything that happened here, then that means Deborah must have been very significant already.
Oh, sure.
If it was after the fact, then she must have made that much of an impact, right? So there's had. So Deborah, the strength and the palm tree of Deborah is a symbol of strength and justice in Jewish tradition. It is a symbol of strong female leadership and a reminder for the Jewish people to stand up for what is right. But wait, in Islam, it is seen as a symbol of strength and courage as well. But wait, it is also used to represent the goddess Isis in ancient Egypt. So that palm tree must have really made a significant impact in the culture and the society around them that time.
Talk to us a little bit about her significance as a judge.
Okay, so Debbie was Israel's only female judge, as recorded in the book of Judges. There might have been more. We don't know. But
yeah, just the ones we know about.
yes.
Yep.
So some see her position as a judge. And think about this. If that's true, then wow. It's a judgment on the weak-willed men of Israel. What do I mean by that? Think about it. If Israel's men were unfit, God chose a woman in a culture and a society where women were looked down upon.
Yep.
They were almost non-existent. And then God says, you know what? I'm going to use a woman because y'all suck.
Yep.
So it's partly to shame the men who should have taken leadership, and it's partly as a sign of God's comforting presence. Like, even if no man steps up, I'm going to use a woman.
Yeah. Because again, understanding the culture, like Leo was talking about, like that's not a thing that was going to happen. Like in the tribal nature of the Canaanite area, women were not the leaders of their tribes. That just wasn't the culture they were.
If nobody steps up in their culture, we're all just gonna die.
Yeah. Honestly, I mean that's the thing. And so, not only is this just another example of God lifting up women in a time where they were the opposite. We saw that a lot when we went through Romans, and as you look through the New Testament. And sometimes you look at the New Testament, you're like, well, there's way more men than women. But compared to the time and the culture they were in, God continues to lift up women into leadership.
Yes, that's so true.
But even more so here in the Old Testament, we see it. And the judges were also they were always having to fight wars and be fighting, and that wasn't a job for women at that time at all. And yet once again, Deborah's brought up to be the judge.
So when she became the judge, the Israelites had been dominated for 20 years already by Jabin. The commander of Jabin's army was named Sisera. The Israelites were treated very cruelly by Sisera and his army, so at this point, their spirits were very low. So God's word comes through Deborah to a man named Barak. Barkey.
Former president of the United States.
Yeah.
Same guy?
Mm-hmm. Same guy.
Timeline might be off a little bit, but all right. So her message to Barak is what?
Mm-hmm. The message is that he will lead the revolt against Sisera. And then look at Barak's response.
I love
just telling.
Please come with me. Please.
Please.
Not even please. It's I'm not going unless you come with
I'll
me.
only go if Deborah goes with me.
Yeah.
You want proof of that? Judges 4:8. There we go. Judges chapter 4, verse 8.
Yep.
Barak, a man, says, I'll only go if Deborah goes with me.
But yeah, especially to think like I'm only going to go fight if a woman comes with me in this culture would have just been so backwards and opposite of what you would expect. They'd be like, the women can stay back while we go do the fight and stuff.
We'll protect you women because we're men.
Yeah. And it
yet,
just shows how incredible Deborah was. But yeah, also like certainly like there wasn't a man at that time.
Yep.
But God knew that, and it was okay because Deborah was there.
Yeah, it's okay. I got you. We got Debbie. So Debbie agrees to join Barkey.
Your nickname, I just can't with your nicknames.
But she also prophesies that the honor for the victory would belong to a woman.
Okay, I'm going to ask you something you might not know because we're early on in Judges, and I'm guessing you haven't in-depth studied the whole thing recently.
Yes.
Is she the only judge who's also a prophet or prophetess in her case?
I think so, yes.
Okay. So I don't know for sure. Maybe we'll get to, chapter whatever and we'll find out different. But that's pretty cool. Like not only is she a judge, but she
again recorded.
She also gets to prophesy. That's pretty fantastic.
I mean, think about it. And again, this is also a testament to how weak the men were during that time.
Yeah, what she prophesies.
The victory will belong to a woman.
Yeah.
So again, it could be God's way of shaming the weak men. So the Israelites came against the army of Sisera. God granted the victory. Sisera fled to the tent of a Hebrew woman called Yael. God is my God. So Yahweh is my my God. So
and here we come to another graphic killing in the book of Judges.
Again.
Yeah.
So Yael gave Sisera milk to drink, covered him with a blanket, and while Sisera slept, she drove a tent peg through his temple.
Unpleasant.
And he died.
I like that, she gives him a warm glass of milk. He asks for water, but she's like, here's some milk. It'll help you go to sleep. Now, I read a couple things on this, and one of the people I was reading, they imply, so I'm in verse, 18. How did you pronounce her name? Yael?
Yael.
Yael came out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Turn aside, my lord, turn aside to me. Do not be afraid." So he turned aside to her into the tent. Like one of the people I read was implying that was sexual in nature. I don't know because I read two other they weren't like full commentaries, but just breakdowns of that passage. Neither of them mentioned that. I don't know. Is that something that you're
the Bible says that Sisera was exhausted.
Yeah, I mean, he had just fought a war
for her to
lost and then ran away.
Right.
And so the other two were the turn aside was she had already planned out this peg through the temple,
right?
But she needed him on his side, and she's like, "Oh, just lay on your side, and I'll cover you with the rug, and you'll have a nice little sleepy sleep."
I really don't see a lot of weight on that sexual innuendo.
That's okay, because I had never read anything because there's plenty of times in the Bible where they use like the soft biblical terms to imply there was a sexual thing, a sexual act happening there. But I hadn't read it before in this one until I was preparing for this podcast, so I just was curious on your thoughts on that. If
probable, but not very.
Maybe possible, but unlikely.
Yep. Yeah. Very, very unlikely.
Okay. I just was curious.
So yeah.
And then peg through the temple. It went in. Doesn't it say it went into the ground? Correct.
It went into the ground. So all the way through.
That is aggressive.
We're not talking about ox goads anymore. Yeah. This is a little smaller than an ox goad. Yeah. It's a tent peg. So.
But it's clearly longer than the width of a head. Now his head might not have been as big as mine.
Right.
But that's pretty good.
Still.
And
we're talking about a skull.
This gal knows how to hammer a tent peg, man.
Yeah.
Like she got it all the way through.
Again,
his
women,
head.
much stronger than men.
I distinctly remember this story from I think it was called the Action Bible. We talked about it on the lobby. When I was a kid, I had a comic book Bible. Like the entire thing was comic book. And it was amazing. And I distinctly remember the story. There was nothing great. Like they didn't, show the tent peg through this guy's head. It wasn't like a graphic. Not in the action. I know.
Nuts.
Super, super disappointing. But all right. So
And yet the tent peg was
the tent peg was right.
very disappointing. Whoever you are who came up with that Bible.
All right. So they won this fight, but we don't really get, as we read through chapter 4, we don't really get a lot of detail on like how they won, right? Like we read about all these chariots and we talked earlier in the podcast about what that would imply about the size and strength of their entire army. But we don't really get any detail. They lose and he runs away and gets tented to the ground.
He just got pegged.
So how did they win against all these chariots? I mean, obviously Jesus.
Yay.
God is how they won.
Jesus.
But do we just not get any detail?
Well, the song of Deborah and Barak, Debbie and Barky, in
No one calls it that.
Judges 5 gives us some detail about how they won.
I told you guys it was in there for a reason.
Yes.
Hopefully you read it.
Verse 4 goes, the earth shook. It starts singing, right? The heavens poured, the clouds poured down water, that kind of thing. So God used the flood to disable the iron chariots. Isn't it just perfect timing? Chariots don't work in mud.
Yeah. Lots of rain on sandy, dirty ground is not going to work well for chariots.
Yep. For those of you who tried to run a 4x4 through mud, you know what it's like.
Yeah.
And we're talking about chariots.
Yep.
So the victory, think about it. The victory was not because of the Israelite army. They didn't say, Barak and Deborah did not say, it was because we were great. We were awesome. We were a bunch of kung fu masters who can overcome horses and chariots. Nope. The victory was not because of Deborah, no matter how great she was. The battle was not because of Barak, and he was a great leader. They attributed the victory to God. It shows us that Debbie had humility and did not forget about God at all.
All right. Just real quick to wrap us up. Maybe not real quick, but just again, talk about the significance of Deborah being a woman and in leadership, and how, why is that significant? Why is that important? And then how does it carry over into, the church today?
Well, the bottom line, something that we need to think about is this. God's power is what matters, regardless of the instrument that he chooses to use. Man or woman, strong or weak, confident or hesitant, it doesn't matter. All are strong when they are moved by God's Spirit and filled with his strength. Remember from last episode, we talked about this. Don't ask God for any other thing just so you will be effective in God's kingdom. Just be faithful and obedient with what God has given you. And it's not because of you, it's because of God. All are strong when they are moved by God's Spirit and filled with his strength. God often calls people to step out in faith to attempt the unexpected. I mean, think about me. I myself, I used to be a speech therapist. God called me to be a pastor and a church planter. I'm not saying that I'm great. I'm saying that God is great. God is the one that's moving people in even today. So God often uses unlikely people and sources to accomplish his plans. God sometimes requires great risk and effort from us as part of his divine plan. I mean, think about it. Deborah and Barak had to risk their lives in war. Yael, right, took in a runaway fugitive and risked her life to end his and help free Israel from oppression. So here's the thing. God is in control of the nations and changes their leaders according to his desires. So what God is asking us to do is this: choose what is right over what is comfortable. Because as long as we choose what is right according to God's will and according to God's plan, he will be the one to see it through, not you. Okay, so here are your head change, heart change, and life change for today. For this week, number 1, head change. Know that God can use us even if we aren't perfect in our obedience and our motivations. God can still use you, just be obedient. Not perfectly obedient, just be obedient. Here's your heart change. Feel confident that God can and will use us and move us in our lives. And life change is this: obey when God asks us to step out in faith in a very specific way. Just obey. Let God work it out.
You got some discussion questions for us?
Okay.
Let's jump in the chat and answer.
Yeah. Please.
If you're listening, get on our YouTube channel. If you're
It's
listening
very
on the other
lonely
ones,
to answer.
Yeah. Don't let Leo be lonely, guys. Leo's lonely. Join him in the comments. Answer at least one of these questions. Maybe find somebody else's answer to respond to.
Yeah. So number 1, how have you used your gifts in the local church? For some of you, that's an ouch. Maybe.
I haven't. Ooh.
Maybe it's time. So, what impact does it make on your relationship with God when you're able to use your gifts? And number 2, Barak wanted to use Deborah as an assurance that God would be with him. So, like him, in what circumstances are we tempted to use God for our personal gain? Again, that's an ouch. Sorry, but that's the question. Number 3, what experience or experiences have shown you God's faithfulness, his trustworthiness, and his sovereignty?
And then next week, Judges 6.
Yep, just one this time.
And we're going to get to maybe the biggest name judge.
Yeah,
It's
so,
probably
Mhm.
it's probably Gideon or Samson. It's one
Yep,
one of
one
the
or
two.
the other, yeah.
Probably the biggest ones. Maybe we'll have them fight it out, you know?
Yep. We'll do
I think Samson probably wins that fight unless his hair's cut. Short hair Samson takes an L to Gideon. Long hair Samson, I'm probably going to put my money on Samson on that one.
That's so
I think
true.
he's got the edge.
Again, the jawbone.
Yeah.
Gideon's got nothing.
But, well, Gideon's got, like 300
He's got
other
wet
people.
fleas.
Yeah, and some wet fleas. Dry ground.
Right.
Very interesting. So I'm excited for chapter 6. Thank you, Pastor Leo, for your teaching, as
You're
always.
welcome.
Thanks to all of you for being with us. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you click that subscribe button. Go ahead and give us a like, give us a comment. It helps other people find our videos when you do that. We really, really appreciate it. We also appreciate the feedback. If you have any thoughts for us on the podcast.
Yes, please.
And then, let's be answering those questions, building that community in the comments like we've been doing in the past. It's really great. We love you, New Hope family, and we will see you next time.
Ingat.